Verbs are doing words or actions. You cannot create a sentence without a verb, so knowing how they work is vital. You must know the important questions to ask yourself as you create verbs in Spanish. We will look at the whole process in this presentation. What are present tense verbs? They describe what is happening now or happens on a general basis. Examples in English would be I am running or I run. Spanish regular verbs present tense. Who's doing the verb? What is the infinitive form of the verb? What do I need to do to the infinitive of the verb? And what are the correct endings that need to be added? Our aims are as follows: to learn how to recognise regular present tense verbs, to learn how to form regular present tense verbs. Step 1. Choose the person doing the verb. This will tell you which ending to use later on. And here we can see the subject pronouns in Spanish divided into singular and plural. You won't ever use these in Spanish unless you need to emphasise who is actually doing the verb, because the ending of the verb will tell you that information anyway. And here they are. Yo, I. Tú, you, singular. Él, ella, he or she. There's also a form usted, which basically means you in a formal context. We also have nosotros or nosotras if it's feminine, and vosotros and vosotras for you plural. And finally, ellos, ellas. This means they if they're a group of boys, or ellas for a group of girls. There is also ustedes, which means you plural. This is the order you would see verbs in regular verb tables and also in online verb tables as well. So knowing the layout is always beneficial. Step 2. Find the infinitive of the verb and chop off the ending. Here we see 3 examples. Hablar, comer, vivir. We chop and then you're left with a stem. Habl, com, viv. The infinitive of the verb is the one you find when you look up a verb in a dictionary. For example, if you look up speak, you'll find hablar, which is to speak. If you look up eat, you'll find comer, which is to eat. And if you look up live, you'll find vivir, which is to live. You then have to apply your knowledge to the verb to make it correct. Think of this useful analogy. Verbs are like flowers. They have a head and a stem. Hablar, comer, vivir. Notice how there's a head, ar, er, ir, and there's a stem, habl, com, vivir. And verbs are like flowers because when you chop off the head, all you're left with is a stem. Here we see the example. Chop off the head, chop, 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 then you're left with the stem. Now you would add the correct ending to make the verb. Here we see the endings that you would add for the person doing the verb. You would put these onto the stem that you're left with after removing the last 2 letters from the infinitive. And they're in the same order we saw earlier. Yo, tú, él, ella, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas. And here we see ella, o, as, a, amos, ais, an. Ia, o, es, e, hemos, eis, en. And ia, o, es, e, imos, is, en. Now, if you notice, there's a lot of similarities here in terms of the endings. For example, er and I are both very similar, the only difference being nosotros and vosotros. AR verbs are by far the most common, but it is really important to know all 3 different groups of verbs. Now you'll see a demonstration of how to apply this knowledge and some examples. When creating verbs yourself, you can either use a paper dictionary or an online dictionary like wordreference.com. So, the first example we need to do is I dance. So let's go to the online dictionary wordreference.com and type dance in. And we press buscar to look for the verb. And as we see, we have dance. And then we have the verb. To music, bailar. That's the one we'll use. So we type in the infinitive, bailar. And as you can see with this reminder on the left, we need a stem plus an ending. And the stem is the infinitive, the one you find in the dictionary, minus the last 2 letters. Now if we use this reminder form here, we can see that for AR the ending would be O if you want to say I. Milo. Next, she draws. We need to find the verb to draw. So we type draw and then buscar. As we can see, there are lots and lots of examples here. So let's see if we can scroll down to find the one to draw, as in to draw a picture. Ah, here we go. Sketch. A flower or picture. Dibujar. So we type in dibujar. Now, we need to remove those last two letters. And then because it's an AR verb for she, ella, we need to add a. Dibuja. Next, we pay. Let's look up pay. Buscar. And we look here, and pay tax or rent is pagar. So pagar. Remember, remove the last two letters, and then because it's an AR verb, we need to add the ending for nosotros or nosotras, which is amos. Pagamos. Next, they write. Let's type writing. And as we look here, put into writing is escribir. Escribir. Just like AR, we take off the ending, which is IR. Now because it's they, ellos or ellas, we've removed the IR and we need to look at the last two letters, which are EN. Escriben. Finally, you break. So let's look up break. Now, because we're going to use this one here, a window or a plate, romper. So we type romper. Now, as it was you singular, remember the first three are all singular and the last three are all plural. So we need the tu form. And as we see for ER, the ending is ES, rompes. Now, as you can see, they're all covered in red at the moment. That's because the language is set to English for the UK. So if we go to review, language, and set the proofing language to Spanish, we can also find it on this list here, then the red should disappear, as you see. Okay, now look at the following examples and conjugate verbs by following the patterns, remembering the three important steps. Decide on who's doing the verb, find the infinitive and chop off the end, and then add the correct ending. Pause the video to complete each task before carrying on. Remember, practice makes perfect. So first we've got hablar, to speak. Hablo, I speak. Hablas, you speak. Habla, he or she speaks, or the formal usted, you speak, or the formal usted, you speak. Hablamos, we speak. Habláis, you plural speak. Hablan, they speak. Now copy this verb down and then conjugate two of these other verbs following the same pattern as hablar. Pause the recording before you carry on. Now let's look at an ER verb, comer, to eat. Como, I eat. Comes, you eat. Come, he or she eats, or usted, the you formal form, you eat. Comemos, we eat. Comeis, you plural eat. Comen, they eat. Now copy this verb down and then conjugate two of these other verbs following the same pattern as comer. Pause the recording before you carry on. Now we see an IR verb, vivir, to live. Vivo, I live. Vives, you live, singular. Vive, he or she lives, él or ella, but also usted, you formal live. Vivimos, we live. Vivís, you plural live. Viven, ellos or ellas, they live, but also the you formal in a plural sense live. Now copy this verb down and then conjugate two of these other verbs following the same pattern as vivir. And remember to pause the recording before you carry on. Now it's time for you to do this process yourself. Firstly, match up the subject pronouns with the correct translation. Remember to write them down. Pause the recording, complete the activity and then mark your work. And if you get it wrong, correct your answer so you learn from your mistake. So we've got yo, and that matches with I. See how you get on with the others now. Número 2. Tú. You singular. Número 3. Él. He. Número 4. Ella. She. Número 5. Nosotros. we. Número 6, vosotros, you, plural. Número 7, ellos, they, masculine. Número 8, ellas, they, feminine. How did you get on? Remember to correct your mistakes if you've made any. Now look up the following verbs in a dictionary. You'll see the words ending in AR, ER or IR. That will tell you which ending to add. Remember, you can use the reminder on the right to help you if you need to. Por ejemplo, número 1. Yo corto. Now this is because if you look up cort, you would find the verb cortar, to cut. And therefore when you chop it off and it's an AR ending, you would put an O in its place for yo, as in I cut. Pause the recording, complete the activity and then mark your work. And if you get it wrong, correct your answer so you learn from your mistake. Número 2. Come. Número 3. Consideramos. Número 4. Beben. Número 5. Trabajáis. Número 6. Rompes. Número 7. Termina. Número 8. Bajo. Muy bien. Vamos a continuar. Here we see a reminder of how the present tense is formed in Spanish. Remember, you just need your stem and your ending, but you do need to know who's doing the verb before you decide on the ending, and they're reminded down the left-hand side with the endings down the right. Here are 3 examples. Hablo, I speak. Come, he or she eats, but also you in a formal sense eat, and vivimos, we live. Now translate the following verbs into English. Remember, work out the infinitive of the verb first. It will be in the dictionary with either AR, ER or IR at the end. And then look at the ending to see who is doing the verb. Por ejemplo, número 1. Odio. I hate. So pause the recording and complete the activity and then mark your work. Remember, if you get it wrong, to correct your answer so you can learn from your mistake. Número 2. Escuchamos. We listen. Número 3. Sube. She, he or it goes up. Remember, it could also be you singular in a formal context. Go up if you're talking to someone who you need to be formal to. Número 4. Saltas. You singular jump. Número 5. Leen. They read. Here's another reminder of how to form the Spanish present tense. Stem plus ending. Now it's going to be a little bit harder, but only refer to this if you need to. And here are your 3 examples. Hablo, I speak. Come, he or she eats. Vivimos, we live. Now translate the following verbs into Spanish. Remember, decide on the correct subject pronoun. Find the infinitive of the verb. Chop the last 2 letters off and then add the appropriate ending for that person. Remember, you don't need to say I or he or we unless you would need to specify who exactly is doing the verb if there could be any confusion. For example, if it was the he or she or the they, then you would need to specify if there was confusion. Remember, you don't need to use the yo, tú, él, ella, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas. Pause the recording and complete the activity and then mark your work. And remember, if you get it wrong, to correct your answer so you learn from your mistake. Número 1. I sell. Vendo. Número 2. He listens. Escucha. Número 3. We drink. Bebemos. Número 4. They jump. Saltan. Número 5. I study. Estudio. Remember to correct your answers if you've made any mistakes before you move on. There are some vitally important verbs that don't follow the same patterns, and these are called irregular verbs. You just have to learn them and then look them up if you're not sure when you're using them. Have a look at these verbs now as an introduction. Tener, to have. Tengo, tienes, tiene. Tenemos, tenéis, tienen. Estar, to be. Estoy, estás, está. Estamos, estáis, están. Ser, to be. Soy, eres, es. Somos, sois, son. Hacer, to do or to make. Hago, haces, hace. Hacemos, hacéis, hacen. Ir, to go. Voy, vas, va. Vamos, vais, van. You just have to learn these verbs off by heart. Today we've looked at Spanish regular verbs in the present tense. We've looked at who's doing the verb, What is the infinitive form of the verb, and what do I need to do to the infinitive of the verb? What are the correct endings that need to be added? Our aims are to learn how to recognise regular present tense verbs and to learn how to form regular present tense verbs as well. I hope you found it useful. Muy bien. Adios.